From the moment the morning light slipped weakly through my curtains, my whole body felt like it had been drained of strength. I was laid up with a burning fever, so hot and heavy that even lifting my hand felt like pushing through thick mud. My vision blurred every few seconds, and my breathing came out in small, uneven breaths. Still, gathering what little strength I had, I asked my eldest son to bring me a glass of water, hoping he would at least show that tiny bit of care. Instead of kindness, he walked over carrying a cup full of cold beer, and before I could react, he splashed it all over my face and blanket. The shock of the icy liquid made my already weak body jolt, and I could only stare in disbelief. From the doorway I heard a burst of loud laughter. There she stood, my son's wife, clapping her hands like she was enjoying a show. She laughed even harder when she saw my wet clothes and helpless expression. My son joined her, holding the empty cup with a smug look, as if he had accomplished something impressive. Even with my fever blurring my senses, that scene burned itself into my mind with painful clarity. Then, as if humiliating me wasn't enough, my son ordered me to clean the house before they returned. I had endured their selfishness and laziness for so long, but this time the cruelty pushed me past my limit. Still, with my throat burning and voice faint, I forced myself to whisper that I would clean it, just so they would leave the room. My name is Helen. I am a 73-year-old housewife who has spent most of her life caring for a home and family. My husband George is 75 and recently retired. After stepping away from work, he finally fulfilled his long-held dream of teaching calligraphy to children at a nearby community center. Seeing him leave the house each day with a gentle smile, carrying his brushes and ink, always warmed my heart. It made me proud to see him living happily in his later years. We have 2 sons. Our younger son is married and raising 2 cheerful children in Canada. But our eldest son, Mark, now 44, still lived with us. He worked part-time at a convenience store, only 4 nights a week, and didn't help with any household expenses. He lived an easy life, without goals, without effort. And despite many warnings from both George and me, nothing changed. At least he wasn't gambling or falling into debt. So eventually we stopped scolding him. Then one day, without notice, Mark suddenly announced he was married. He brought his wife into the house without even giving us the chance to prepare or greet her. She barged inside as if she were entering her own home. From that moment on, I had to include her in the meals I prepared. Cooking for one more person wasn't the issue, but the way she acted made everything feel heavy. She refused to wash dishes, never cleaned up after herself, and didn't even say thank you. She went so far as to demand a cup of coffee after dinner, sitting there expectantly while I cleaned up. My husband couldn't tolerate it. He scolded them sharply, and when he was around, they stayed quiet. But the moment he stepped out, the demands returned. She would ask me to take her dresses to the cleaners or handle other errands she should do herself. If I warned her, Mark immediately took her side, saying it was no trouble for me and I shouldn't make a fuss. Even though they lived with us for free, they didn't pay a single cent toward electricity, groceries, or anything else. Their behavior was I didn't want to spark a fight between father and son. So I decided to wait a bit longer, hoping things might improve. That morning, as usual, I did what my daughter-in-law asked and took her clothes to the cleaners, George and I love visiting our younger son's family in Canada twice a year. We had already planned to go again during the upcoming week-long holiday. Our grandchildren adored us, and we always brought them small gifts. We chose toys and planned to buy a roll cake as a souvenir, because we enjoy peaceful trips now that we're older. We usually take the sleeper train instead of a plane. The slow movement of the train, the passing scenery outside the window, it all soothed our hearts. The day before the trip, I felt unusually cheerful. After seeing George off to his calligraphy class, I went shopping for the last few things. On my way home, I stopped by a small cake shop that sold lovely handmade cookies. Knowing cookies would stay fresh longer than cake, I bought some for the children. But as I walked home, the sky darkened and a light drizzle began. It quickly turned into heavy rain, soaking my clothes before I could reach shelter. I hurried to a convenience store to buy an umbrella, but by the time I arrived, I was drenched and shivering. Wanting nothing more than a hot bath to warm my chilled bones, I bought the umbrella and rushed home. As soon as I entered the house, chilled to the core, I headed toward the bathroom. But before I could step inside, my daughter-in-law appeared. Without hesitation, she pushed past me, telling me she needed to go out and would use the bath first. She didn't even wait for my reply before shutting the door behind her. Even though it wasn't her home, she acted like she owned everything. Feeling miserable, I changed into dry clothes and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. While cooking, I began sneezing repeatedly and a deep worry settled in my chest. Falling sick right before our long-awaited trip would be awful. But Mark's wife stayed in the bath for more than an hour, ignoring everything around her. The next morning, the day we were supposed to leave, I woke feeling heavy and weak. My throat burned, my nose was blocked, and when I checked my temperature, it had climbed to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Realizing the cold had settled firmly, I told George to go without. So the grandchildren wouldn't catch it. He suggested canceling the whole trip, but our tickets were already purchased and the gifts were bought. I insisted he go alone, handing him the cookies from the day before. Even though he was worried, I told him my fever would go down with rest and medicine. Before leaving, George spoke firmly to Mark and his wife, telling them to take care of the house while I rested. That was unusual for him, but he said it anyway. After seeing him off, I was about to lie down again when I overheard the two of them talking in the living room. They complained loudly, saying it was such a hassle and that now that George was gone, they could live freely again. Their words cut through me like ice. It was unbelievable how ungrateful they were, despite living in our home without contributing anything. When I reminded them that they were only able to live here because of George, they became angry. Mark claimed they were doing us a favor by staying with us in our old age. His wife added that normally people dislike living with their in-laws, implying we should be grateful instead. The irony was painful. They had moved in without asking, yet acted like they were performing some noble duty. Feeling exhausted, I ignored them and returned to my room. But later that evening, my daughter-in-law came in and shook me awake. She scolded me, saying I wasn't planning to skip cooking just because I was a little sick. She added that she couldn't cook, so I had to do it.
Hearing such remarks
from a 35-year-old woman made my chest tighten with frustration. Even my husband should have warned them more strongly. I wanted to rest, but she wouldn't leave the room. So I dragged myself to the kitchen, thinking at least eating something and taking medicine might help. While I prepared dinner, Mark came home. Even though I stood there in a mask, my face pale and tired, he said nothing, just demanded to know why the bath wasn't ready. To them, my illness didn't matter at all. Wanting to rest, I finished cooking and prepared the bath. When I came back, they were sitting comfortably, eating and chatting. They told me they were going on an overseas trip the day after tomorrow and not to spread my cold to them. Their sudden announcement stunned me. I ate a small meal in the dining area, away from the warmth of the living room. As she had ordered, they talked excitedly about their upcoming 3-week Europe trip. Mark was taking time off his part-time job and they were thrilled about it. I hadn't heard anything about these plans, but honestly, I felt relieved that they would be gone for a while. The next morning, the day they were supposed to leave, my cold had grown much worse. I couldn't even sit up in bed, and when I checked my temperature, I had nearly a 103 Fa fever. I was thirsty, but my headache was so severe that I couldn't even lift my head in this state. Mark came to me, "Hey, cook us some food. You can still cook even if you have a cold." Tears swelled up in my eyes at the sight of my son telling his sick mother to cook eat out. I managed to say at my words. Mark frowned but said nothing and started to leave the room. Before he left, I asked Adam to bring me a glass of water. He thought he would at least do that much for me, so I waited. But what Mark brought me was a glass full of beer and had splashed that beer all over me as I lay bedridden with a high fever. From the direction of the door, a loud laughter echoed. When I turned to look, it was my eldest son's wife, clapping her hands in amusement. In front of me, my son Mark was also laughing, holding the empty cup. It was unbelievable. Although I was feverish and dazed, that sight burned clearly into my memory. "Make sure you clean the house before we get back," I had tolerated Mark and his wife's selfishness up Tano, but I couldn't stand it any longer. I'll keep it clean. I mustered the strength to say loud enough for them to hear, despite the pain in my throat after that. Mark and his wife cheerfully left house. I didn't even have the energy to wipe the beer-soaked mess from my face, and I fell asleep as I was when I woke up. I felt somewhat refreshed, though my head was groggy. I remembered buying Splashed with Beer by Mark, but surprisingly, I didn't feel sticky at all. Covers on my bed were also changed just as I was questioning what had happened to my husband. George came in with a basin. Seeing me sitting up, he placed his hand on my forehead and asked, "Are you okay? Why is George here? Wasn't he supposed to be with our second son's family?" I tried to ask but couldn't voice it out, noticing my confusion. George began to explain he had taken a sleeper train to visit our second son's family, but he was worried about me and decided to return early. He didn't trust Mark and his wife to take care of me. Our second son's family also suggested he hurry back, so he flew home. When he arrived, he found me lying exhausted in bed with a strange smell of beer lingering around. Quickly cleaned my face with a damp towel, tidied up the area, and cared for him while I slept for the full day. When George asked me what had happened, I tried to explain, but my voice failed. Memory of being splashed with beer by Mark brought tears to my eyes. Seeing this, George brought me some water and said sorry, I shouldn't have asked. Just rest for now. He then went to prepare me some porridge. It turned out had prepared the porridge so it would be ready whenever I woke up. The kindness of George brought tears to my eyes again. Thanks to George's care, I regained my energy in about 2 days. When I told George what had happened, his face turned stern. "I can't stand it anymore." "Yes, me too." 3 weeks passed since Mark and his wife left for their overseas trip, while I was enjoying peaceful days with George. My phone rang. It was a call from Mark. "Here it comes," I did, pressing the answer button. "What the hell? Why is our house gone?" "Well, didn't you say to clean the house after you recovered from the cold?" I told George everything about Mark and his wife's actions. How he forced a sick me to take care of things, how they threw beer on me while I was bedridden with a high fever, and how they went on an overseas trip themselves. After hearing my story, George muttered, "I can't stand it anymore." Until now, I had always been the one to calm George down, but after this incident, I didn't feel like pacifying him anymore because I myself couldn't forgive them. Actually, George and I had been secretly planning to build a new house without telling our eldest son and his wife. The house isn't finished yet, but we moved into a monthly rental apartment and sold our house in order to stun them with the news. We have been told that Samyeon wanted to buy our land to build a shop, so the sale happened quickly. Originally had planned to keep the old house for our eldest son and his wife, but after the way they treated us, there was no need to consider them anymore. The place has already been turned into an empty lot, so they must have been shocked to find the house gone. The new house will be completed in about 2 weeks. A carpenter we know has allowed us to store our belongings and furniture therein advance. As we've explained the situation to him, we disposed of all 4 eldest sons and his wife's belongings. When we told them this, our eldest son shouted, "Are you kidding? I'll report you to the police." His wife was also yelling in the background at that moment. George took over the phone. I switched it to speaker mode. Hesed to our eldest son in a low voice, "Go ahead, tell the police. I'll tell them to you guys threw beer at your sick mother, then went on a vacation abroad and even forced her to do housework while she was sick." Who do you think is the bigger sinner, you guys, or us, for disposing of your things? My husband's face as he spoke to our eldest son was like Avalanche. "This has nothing to do with that selling the house. Where are we supposed to live? Where are you guys even staying?" Your son yelled back. George replied, "That house was originally ours. It's our right to sell it. Plus you're no longer our son. Didn't contact us anymore." And then he hung up. 2 weeks later, we got a call saying that our new house was completed. So George and I headed over. The call was from the carpenter, a friend of George's at S, about 60 years old, and the site supervisor. He showed us around the house, explaining the layout. We designed it as a single-story accessible house, keeping our future retirement life in mind. It's an even more beautiful house than we imagined, and we couldn't wait to start living there. The furniture we had left in the living room had been moved by the carpenters. When I thanked them, they said no problem. George really helped us out back in the day, so this is nothing, and so the two of us, George and Dee, started living in our new house. The house was even more comfortable than we had imagined, and our life was peaceful without our eldest son and his wife around. However, about a month after we moved into the new house, our Feverish eldest son and his wife showed up. Neither George nor I had told them our address, and our younger son Mark and his wife shouldn't have told them either, because we explained the situation. They probably hired a detective or something to find us. Hey, it's not fair for you to sell the house, dispose of our stuff, and then move to such a nice place by ourselves. As your eldest son, I have the right to live here, don't I? Our son said, glaring at us with large bags and hishins we had intended to cut off teas with them, but we were stunned to see your eldest son and his wife, who were clearly intent on moving in. Just then voices came from the back of the house. What are you guys here for? To what end after taking her living place? How dare you ask such a thing from today? We're leaving here too, our son said as they were about to step in the front door. Open. Mark, what are you doing here to cause trouble again? Come on, you're old enough to stand on your own 2 feet, Stephen said with a look of disbelief on his face. Beside him were his wife and their 2 grandchildren. We're visiting because the new house had just been finished after relaxing at home for a while. Stephen's family had gone to a nearby convenience store. Who is that? Are they bad people? 5th grader Sophia asked innocently. My husband had just been about to drive Mark and his wife away. Suddenly had an idea. While Stephen's family is staying for a week, you two should also stay here. I want allow you to squat here indefinitely. Thought which that he welcomed everyone at the entrance into the house. The living room gathered, and the first to lounge on the sofa were Mark and his wife. Man, I'm beat, mother-in-law. Can I have some coffee? I'll take mine black, Mark said. Casualiston's wife was taken aback by the casually made requests of Mark and his wife. At this, the grandchildren rushed to Mark and his wife. Why can't you two doth it yourselves when you're adults? Even I, a kid, can pour my own juice. The innocent comments of the grandchildren made Mark's wife uncomfortable, and she went to pour her own coffee. However, the grandchildren's why attacks continued. We can't you cook even though you're an adult woman? My mom can cook anything. Why didn't you clean up after yourself? Both me, Dad, and I always clean up the plates when we're done eating. Why can't you doth it? My sister and I always do it ourselves. The grandchildren perhaps do it. The good upbringing by Stephen's wife were responsible and often help her. Stephen also didn't just leave everything to his wife. They worked together. Therefore, it was probably perplexing. 4th grandchildren that Mark and his wife didn't do anything themselves. At first Mark and his wife had retorted, but Fewi attacks didn't stop, and by the end of the week they were both exhausted. Mark's wife in particular seemed like being called Auntie. Don't call me Auntie, she told her grandchildren in earnest. But when they replied, why not, you're an auntie, aren't you? You're not young enough to be called sister, she was hawked. Even I and Stephen, who were listening nearby, couldn't help but laugh. After Stephen and his wife left, we sent Mark and his wife away. They were worn out by the children's incessant attacks, so we were able to drive them away without much resistance. However, a few months later, we received a message asking, can you lend us some money? Up until now, they had been staying in our home, eating our food without paying a cent in rent or living expenses. Since Mark, our oldest son, was making enough money from his convenience store job to cover all expenses, it wasn't a problem at all. Now that they had been kicked out of the house, Mark and his wife were supposed to start paying for their own rent and living expenses, yet they kept spending money as they used to, seeming living off borrowed money without any savings. To speak of, their only income was Mark's salary from working at a convenience store 4 days a week. Mark's wife seemed to have no intention of reconciling their situation. It was audacious to say the least for them. Toast, can you lend us some money? We will never lend you money in the future, nor will we help you, we told them, and then blocked Mark's number. A few days later, while my husband and I were out, we received a call on my husband's phone from our home security company. There was an intruder in our house, and they sent us the video footage. It turned out that Mark and his wife were trying to sneak into our house through a window. It was pitiful that they were resorting to breaking into their parents' house to steal money because they were broke. At least they hadn't caused trouble for others, but that's not saying much. Mark and his wife were quickly apprehended by the security and were taken away by the police, who were called to the scene. They were released because they were family bit. Not before being harshly scolded. Since then Mark and his wife stopped forcing their way into our house or trying to break in. We have both blocked their calls, so we never received phone calls from them, according to Stephen, our second son. He also received a request for money from Mark. Apparently Mark had borrowed money from Long Shoks and was now on a run because he couldn't pay it back. You reap what you sow. Payback the money you borrowed yourself, Stephen said, and blocked Mark's number as well. We don't know what happened to Mark and his wife after that, but we chose to forget about the people who left us as they poured beer over a sick person with no involvement with Mark and his wife. My husband and I are enjoying our peaceful every lives. Me husband used to teach calligraphy classes at the nearby community center, but now he teaches at home in a room we designed for that purpose. When Stephen and his family come to visit their grandchildren and other children, talk the calligraphy classes together, and they seem to be having a good time making friends. I am grateful for these peaceful days, and I'm making the most of each day.